All right, I think everyone's here that's going to be here. I'm Tim. Nice to meet you, all of you guys. If you guys want to look at this, these slides aren't meant to be necessarily notes as they are just guiding the conversation, but if you want to get to them, this web address up here is always publicly available. It's slig.es/Tim Bouchard, my name, /winning-website. You want to take that down. The most useful things might be, I'm going to ask a lot of questions about what you have, what you want, and advice on which way to go with certain things. There's no wrong answer in my talk. There's no 100% definitive right answer in my talk. The purpose of my talk is not to sell you on hiring me to make a website. It's to tell you all of the information you need before approaching anybody about a website, whether you do it strictly yourself or whether you go to a professional or freelancer, any of those things. So, yes, you can always see these slides, and then hopefully you'll have a couple notes and may write down some answers to some of my questions during this talk that will complement the slides if you ever want to look back at them, or maybe you want to go back at the slides and after this talk or in a week after you think about it some more, write down a new set of answers based on thinking about what we've talked about today. Do with it what you will. I'm going to make it full screen now so it looks better. I wish it was widescreen, but we will do this. So the most important thing is to know who I am, and then I'm going to learn a little about you by asking questions. I went to the University of Buffalo, but before I ended up there, I was one of those 16-year-old kids poking around on Yahoo GeoCities in the late 90s. I don't know if you guys remember GeoCities, Angel Fire, Lycos, all of those fun little website building things. I went to the University of Buffalo, I did media study, which is film, video, design, and some light programming and web stuff. I've been an employee for a web company. I only did that for a year. I did not work for someone very good, but I learned a lot of things on what not to do about business, communicating with clients, all of that fun stuff. So while I may not have enjoyed the experience, I certainly learned a lot from it. I've been a freelancer, which is step 2 of leading a company. So I've experienced low budget projects, one-on-one communication with clients. At some point, I've been where all of you have been or are now. And now I'm a partner at my corporation with my design partner, Mike LaDuca, who is managing the office today. And we have 2 employees. So I've gone from student to sole proprietor to partner to employer. We have 2 employees underneath us. I have a couple of skill sets that are pretty relevant to web design. These probably don't mean much to you. I just put them up there to fill space, along with my pretty photo that my partner took. So, as I said, these slides are going to be conversation starters. I want to talk to you. I don't want to lecture to you. I work in an industry where we base our work off of things that potential clients and signed clients tell us. So I'd like to model the discussion off of who you are, where you are, and together we'll be helping each other learn more about getting into the website process. Before we start with these 3 questions, who already has a website? Who does not have a website? Okay, so there's a couple, and then there's most. Of the people that do have websites, how many people are happy with their website? Or the alternate question will be, how many people just got something up? So, how many people are happy with their website? Got a couple satisfied customers. TJ is really good at that too. How many people are not quite where they want to be with their website yet? Okay. So the good thing about this is that a few of you already know you want to learn more about it, and a couple of you think you're set and maybe you aren't. But I'm not going to put that against you because I know some of you already have good websites. I know a few of you. The first thing to identify with the website is who is your visitor. If you can't identify your visitor, and I know Neil went over this a little bit in his talk if some of you were over there, which is your target market, target audience is the way I put it, because as a website is a venue for displaying things, so it's more of an audience than it is a market. That determines what style of website you want, what type of content you put on the website, and what primarily goes on the homepage. Does anyone have an idea of how soon people leave websites once they're on them?
It's like seconds.
It's under 20 seconds. So we'll get to talking about content later, but knowing who you are helps you formulate what you have on your homepage, which is the most important part of any site, because you only have 20 seconds to grab someone's attention and get them to click through. Of the 100% of people that are on your site, generally 50 will leave your site, 50% will leave your site within 20 seconds. You want to try and keep that number as high as possible, and identifying your audience lets you formulate what content to use for that. So as we're talking about these things, I'm using them as discussion points, but also there are questions for you to write down. What is your target audience right now? Maybe jot down an idea. Because unlike some of the other workshops today, I can't take you through building a website in an hour-long discussion, but what I can do is set all of your prerequisites up for when you do talk to someone about doing a website. And identifying answers to some of these bullet points that we'll go through today will give you a nice list of conversation points for when you either tackle this on your own or go to a professional for it. So your target audience. Think about that for a second, write it down. It could be a demographic age-wise, it could be a demographic business-wise, it could be a combination of those two things. It could also identify what style you use. Do you want something more bland? Do you want something that's more engaging, or do you want something that's more off the wall? These are things that if you're working with a freelancer or a professional, they're going to be one of the first questions they ask you, because as far as they're concerned, you've handed them a blank canvas and now they need to paint a picture for you. And if you don't give them any guidance, they'll give you what they think the picture should be. And if you're not ready for that, then you should have some feedback ready to go before they even ask you. And if they don't ask you, make sure you bring it up. Any good designer will ask you. The second thing to identify before you even get to the site is, what is the objective of this site? Are you selling something? That goes into a whole other world of e-commerce. We could get to that later. Are you pushing a service? I have a service-based website because I'm a web designer. Are you trying to gather a community? Is this a site where people will sign up and participate with each other? You can go multiple different ways and varying complexities, which also affect your decisions later on when we talk about how you want to have your website built. The easiest one, and probably the one that most people start out with, is just the sort of brochure style website. There's no user interaction yet, there's no e-commerce yet. I always gauge, we work with a lot of small businesses. A lot of people come to us with big ideas and they're little operations. It's better to spend your efforts and money on your business plan than it is to wrap all of it up into a website that you can't push yet. Baby steps. It applies to everything. It doesn't just apply to websites, use it for your business plans too. We have people come to us and ask for what amounts to $15,000 to $20,000 websites with user systems, e-commerce, and automated email sending and notifications. Are they really ready for that? I guess that's up to them, but I always like to ask that question because websites can be built upon. They're like skyscrapers, like the Harbor Center that's opening up. They're building 5 levels of retail and ice rinks, and they aren't even getting to the hotel until they open the first thing. Think of a website like that. There's different levels to it. Start with the brochure, make sure you can capture visitors, and then if you're a business that intends to sell things online, you can always add a shopping cart if your website was built correctly or is in a platform where you can plug in something like that. We'll get to web platforms after this. So that might be something to write down too. So by now you might already have written down who your audience is, whether it's an age group or a style of customer, and what your objective is, which is to either just capture their information to make a sale, actually sell them something, or get them to participate in your website. These are all very basic concepts, but they're very important for the rest of the process. Competitors are a good way of gauging what the bar is, and also what style is relevant to the industry. I wouldn't rely too much on competitor style because I like to think that everyone's competitors can't do something as well as they can. So if you set the bar, you can aim higher. A lot of times, we deal with manufacturers and they have some of the worst websites in the world. So when a manufacturer comes to us, it's pretty easy to get them a site that looks better. Can we get them a site that turns leads into sales better? Which means it's going to be easy to tackle the design aspect because all their competitors' sites look like garbage. But the more important thing at that point of design is easy, is making sure that the user experience benefits moving people from landing on the website to some sort of lead generation contact form, or at least a page that has enough information that it incites a phone call. Because a website doesn't do you any good if you can't get people contacting you. At the end of the slides, if we've got extra time, we could just run through some sites and I could show you ways. Maybe I'll just use my own so I don't call out any clients or competitors or anything like that. But you don't have any necessarily anything to write down about competitors. If you know of a couple off the bat, you might want to write yourself a little note, check out what people that are in your industry are doing, and then set the bar higher than that. Another thing that Neil touched on in his talk was uniqueness, and another way to be unique is to have marketing materials that present yourself in a fashion that you want to be presented or perceived. If you're handing out things that you chop together in Vistaprint for business cards, the common consumer can identify those things. Think about this the same for your website. Does anyone have any questions on like identifying what your needs might be for websites before we move on?
A lot of people just throw up websites and they get zero hits, or they say, oh, they're small. A lot of people are small businesses, or they feel like the internet's the great equalizer, so I'll be up there, but it doesn't bring anyone. Do you see for small business? Are sites more bringing you drive, like Angie's List goes out and gets people and brings them to the site, or do you believe more in sites being optimized to try to get people through Google searches to come to you? Which for a small business is it more? Which do you which?
Well, it's a good question, but think about the timeline we're on. We haven't even hired anyone to do a site yet, but we will talk about that aspect at the end. But to address the first aspect, as I said, if you're working in baby steps and you're starting on shoestring, Sean brings up a good point. If you aren't going to have any professional help with keywords, optimization, or pay-per-click advertising, which we'll all talk about later, then using either phone book online directories, even if they cost you like $10 or $50 a year to be a part of, the business card should have your website, flyers should have your website. At that point, it's your responsibility to get people to your website. Google just doesn't automatically say, hey, Bob's Hardware Store has a website now, and everyone's going to be like, I'm going to go to that website now. If you're not going to reach out or spend time massaging the content on your website, you need to use your networking ability on a smaller scale level to drive people to it, and then let the website speak a little bit for you before they get back in touch with you, kind of thing. But we will talk about SEO and pay-per-click stuff at the end. Yeah. So you've identified who your audience is, you've identified what your objective is, and you know what the bar is set for being better than your competitors. The next thing is getting a domain name. Some of you have been through this process, you already have websites. Some of you don't have websites yet. Buying a domain name may be, if you feel comfortable with nothing else in this entire process, the one thing that you should force yourself to do. Model the domain name. There's two ways to do it. After your company is generally their recommended way, you can also model it after your product. But just know that if your product changes and your company name remains the same, your domain might fall out of favor with the message that you're trying to get across. So that's why you generally always see it modeled after the business name. Be careful about using wacky extensions that are meant for other countries. Generally, if the .com is not available, you can get away with using the .net and people will still find it a respectable web address. The .co is out now, which is a little bit more expensive in terms of dollars, not tens of dollars. But try and find a version of your business name represented with a .com, whether it's using an acronym or actually just spelling out the name, like ours is luminousmedia.com. The real important thing is that this process is not hard. Just go to GoDaddy, search for it. If it's available, buy it, and they will take you through the checkout. The reason I recommend that is I cannot tell you as a service provider how many times I've tried to get control of people's domains to help them with their sites, and the old service provider is being a pain. And the last thing that the client wants to do is pay someone to communicate with their old service provider, and the last thing that they want to do is spend time on communicating with their old service provider. It's like owning your phone number. Just have control of it. Any good service provider will provide you your files so that you can move your domain wherever you want. And that's another thing we'll talk about when we get to finding a professional.
Promise the last question.
No,
Okay.
Questions drive this conversation. Don't just let him be the only one.
A lot of the .coms are very expensive. You want car.com or something that's
Mhm.
$1 million, but even some of the smaller ones are very expensive because they're very limited. Right now, they're on the verge, if they haven't already, on the verge of coming out with 100 new names. .inc, .company, .service, .rent. There's going to be, so within a very short time, instead of .com, there's going to be a zillion extensions, .sears, .everything. And is that going, in your estimation, does that make is that going to diminish the value of the .com, where everybody's making these fortunes selling the .coms? Will it make it the .com less? You said stay away from .co or something, but if it's going to be diluted by everywhere you go, it's going to be these new extensions. Will the .com still maintain?
Think of it as the opposite. Think of it as you have one of the last remaining entities on the most relevant domain extension. So there may be 50 other ones, but the .com will always be the most respected. And search engines see it the same way too.
So even if it gets to be .service, so it's, even if there's .services or .service, website services, website.com will always be in your estimation.
So you'll always be able to optimize a website to show up higher in search rankings, but the .coms are generally seen as better opportunities for the search engine to find a relevant business site.
I read an article that people are very skeptical if you aren't a com or an They tend not to trust the brand.
So when I was talking about the .net and the .co, that's sort of the same idea. And also think about this the same way. If someone knows your business name but doesn't remember what your website is,
they're always going to go.
sometimes they like to just try and type in the URL themselves.
Yeah.
And most people will type in the business name without any spaces and try throwing a .com at the end. Or just do a Google search and then hope that the search does it. But that's sort of the same thing. Even with 500 other extensions coming out, that .com is rooted in all of our brains right now.
It's almost like the gold.
Right, so you're saying what happens when all the new players come in? Well, that means that the all-stars are still on .com and they become even more valuable mentally if you think about it, and they may become more valuable financially too. Right now you can still get them for about $12 a year, especially if you're looking for your company name. If you want a keyword-laced domain, you're going to pay some pretty big bucks for it, and I bet you that someone's already bought it and they're just holding on to it to sell it.
Not too many single word domain, not too many single name .coms that are for sale at $12.95.
Between the internet boom starting and people harvesting them and then just collecting them as investments, that's why.
But they've also made them very expensive, whereas it used to be just you bought it for $12. Oh, that's great. But now the annual fee is so high that if you have 50 domains, I happen to have a bunch of them.
Right.
But it's gotten to the point where one has to now, it's a big investment to keep a name now. It used to be nothing, but now to keep up more than one or two names is very expensive.
So what he's referencing is like buying the .net, buying the .co, and buying some other representations, or just having a collection of related
If
domains.
you have a bunch of .coms and they have 2 or 3 or 4 words, then you have to think twice if it's going to cost, you know, every year it's costing you money, and say, what am I going to do with this special?
Right. But in the case of, it's totally true. And in the case of what we're probably talking about more along the lines of having your one domain, you can sign up for a domain with your company name, likely for somewhere between $10 and $15 a year. Have it for 3, usually they offer you 1 year to as many years as you want, and they'll reduce the price if you have more years. The main lesson to learn from this mini little slide with only 6 words on it is protect your property. Your domain is your property. Take the time to just put your credit card into GoDaddy or any one of those sites that has those names, and just keep it under your own control. You can give other people the administration rights to that domain, and you can also take away those administration rights. And they also have support staffs that will help you. So don't let you or your new web developers get caught in that drama.
Can I ask just a real basic question now? Your
I like hard
domain,
questions, too.
your domain provider is different than your service provider, right? I mean, the person.
Yeah, so when I said service provider, I meant like your freelance web designer or your web company.
So my question is, I bought my domain name one place, and I have GoDaddy for my service. Do you generally stay with it? Do they have the rights to the domain name once you buy it from one company? You
No,
stay
you can
with them?
transfer domains between providers. A lot of times, I've found that Network Solutions has a lot of red tape and extra
That's who I have.
fees, and they will charge you to move your domain to GoDaddy. I don't think it's a ton of money,
Okay.
but
Because I have Network Solutions, and then I have GoDaddy for my.
yeah.
I mean, it's not too expensive. I mean,
Nothing's really ever too expensive with the domain names unless you're trying to buy a keyword-based one. But they will. You can change. You can move domain names around providers if they have different prices. I've always found GoDaddy to be the most affordable and easier to use, and they have an American support staff, which is nice. So you can call someone and understand what they're saying.
They try to sell you a bunch of, they say a bunch of security type things.
Yes.
And I mean, it's $12.95, but they say somebody might steal your name, or hackers, or this or that, so give them $100 for this, $100 for that, for all these
So
protections.
this is what I'd say for that. When you register, you can do a public registration or a private registration. There is a service called ICANN that stores every domain owner's information. And if you pay the extra $2.99 or something for the year as part of your renewal, they'll keep the registrant information private, and the only thing that'll be public is the administrator's information. I could go on a site called whois.net right now, look up any one of your domains and see who owns it. So what they're doing is they're offering you a protection on that. The other thing you brought up, which is good to note, is while GoDaddy may be an easy solution to buying a domain, they will try and sell you 50 things before you get to the end of the cart. Unless you know that you need web hosting because you've talked with someone, or you know that you need a secure shell certificate, which I'll talk about later with e-commerce, you don't need to buy any of that stuff because you can always add it in, or it can also be provided by a different service provider. So generally, you can buy the domain. It's like when I said baby steps with websites. Buy the domain, get your cheap domain, leave all the extra services off. You can always go back and add them in if you need something, or another service provider will take care of those for you. So it's their sales tactic, which works and keeps them in business. So anything else on domain names before we get into some meat and
Is there a
potatoes?
risk of people, if you have a good name, or you think you have a good name, or you have a good name, how often is it that somebody comes and just steals it from you without you, because you don't have a security certificate on it or something like that?
What the security is for the private information. The certificate is for
Let's say steal the ownership, take it away
encrypting.
from you.
Yeah, the ownership isn't related to those things. Ownership is just if you have it paid up and you'll get renewal notices as it starts to expire, no one can ever take it away from you.
Can't be just transferred, they can't.
No. You would have to let it expire, and generally most good companies give you a 30 to 60 day window to retain it before they absolutely release it. So they do a lot of hand-holding to make sure people don't get put in the wrong position. Usually GoDaddy will send a notice 6 to 8 weeks out, 4 weeks out, 2 weeks out, 1 week out. and then they'll give you the cushion afterwards. I'm going to skip hosting because I'll talk about it with the types of websites after this. Websites used to be built static. What I mean by static, and why I chose this awesome picture of this guy from the old times, is you would hire a web developer and they would manage web file after web file after web file after web file after web file. And if you needed anything, they would have to go into your server space, find the file, open it up, make the change, and re-upload the file. That's the old way of doing things, because what happened was web providers, or some web providers, couldn't make updates quick enough for clients. They were doing file management, files were getting crossed, websites had broken links on them, nothing was tied together. The way that it's going now is that websites are driven by databases, which is what we call dynamic. And what that means is you will have a series of page layouts, and you will, or your web provider will update pages using some sort of control panel where you can type in the title of the page, type in the text, hit save, and now there's a new page. And what it does is it takes the page layout you wanted, or the section of the site that you're in, with no coding knowledge, save a new entry in the database, and when someone hits that URL, it pulls the information to the page. I don't want to get too technical because it's not that relevant to our conversation. But what this type of website does is it allows for services that we're going to talk about on the next slide for people making their own websites, people managing the content on their own websites, and web providers being able to limit the file management, which makes maintaining websites easier. This is probably the most important screen on the whole presentation, just so you guys know. As I told you, I'm not going to try and sell you on having to go with someone like me to do websites, but what I do want to do is make sure that when you leave here today, you know what all of your options are, whether you're going to do it yourself or hire someone else to do it for you. And I'd like to go through and give you some examples so you can check stuff out on your own. If you're very much on a shoestring budget, there are a multitude of do-it-yourself website sites out there. The pros to these are the cost is minimal. You're talking maybe $30 to $50 a month. Now, I know what you're saying, $30 to $50 a month might be a lot of money when you think about it happening on your credit card every month, but the alternative is when you start to get into professional work, you're talking about thousands of dollars of work. And if you have a $30 a month website for a year, you're paying in the 300s instead of the 3,000s. So it is very affordable, and there are very good options out there right now. My favorite is Squarespace. They have responsive layouts, which I'll get to later. They're clean designs. Their user interface is very good. They are actively involved in the web community, so they aren't just trying to make money, they're also trying to help advance web. The other one is Wix, which I don't like as much, but it's very popular, it's widely advertised. I'd say if you're going for either one of those options, lean towards Squarespace. The other is WordPress. WordPress.com is the purchasable do-it-yourself website. WordPress.org is the freelancer customizable package download. That's a little different. What any of those services will let you do is take a template from their collection, modify some graphics on it for your logo. Some of them let you choose colors. Remember that when you choose a template, you're probably choosing it because it looks good. So don't mess with the colors too much if you think that you are capable of getting your design across. But the real benefit is being able to create pages on a whim based on page layouts and just add them arbitrarily to a navigation. They're fully expandable. You can add as many pages to your site as you want. They give you some page layouts to base that, what each type of your site looks like. Generally, these templates are themed towards different business areas, so they provided you with some page layouts that are relevant to your business. The detractors from doing this style is If you're going with a template design, just know that there's probably a couple hundred or 1,000 people that already have the same looking website. That's okay, as long as you make it look good. That's fine. The only con is if that matters to you. There's no real custom functionality with that because what they've given you is a tool that's already pre-built that they want you to use, and their support staff will mostly just be there to help you figure out how to use what's been provided rather than build upon it. It's kind of like running an apartment. You can't really you can't make a building expansion onto an apartment because the landlord would kill you. And they sort of have generic support. You get that with bigger companies. You have phone pools. You'll probably talk to a different person every time. Some of them limited to just email tickets. You won't get people on the phone. You'll have people talking through email. Now, having said all that, if you pick something like Squarespace, it will make a very nice starting point for you to have a website, and that they will help you connect the domain to it. So, does anyone have any questions on the DIY aspect of it? Okay. These aren't like industry terms, I just made these up. So the next one is DIY Pro. This is sort of moving away from a pre-built service that you do everything yourself with no guidance to a service where you have a couple of these content management systems, aka CMS, which is the buzzword. Drupal, Joomla, and WordPress are the three highly used, most popular ones. The best bet for you if you're going to find a freelancer or web professional to build you or expand upon a template would be WordPress. The other, Joomla is pretty good. Drupal is very much geared towards larger websites like the New York Times and things like that. I just put it up there as an example. What they will do is they will download the WordPress install. They'll find a starting theme, take a design that they've worked with you on, and implement that design into a template, or build it up from scratch. And what this will do is allow you to manage your website through WordPress, which, while user-friendly in terms of not needing to know code, is a little bit more complex in navigating the control panel versus something like Squarespace or Wix. But if you have a little bit of time to invest into it and learning the ins and outs of the control panel, or if you work with a good provider where they will take time and run you through it, it could still be a very nice DIY way of having a website that you can expand on. It has the same code-free content, it's fully expandable. If you work with a freelancer, you'll have a little bit of that personal support where someone can like hold your hand and help you get through it. The cons for this are the cost will be higher than doing it yourself because now you're bringing in someone else to help you. Generally, the more customized the design template you want, the higher the cost will be. Sometimes people that customize WordPress templates don't make it as customized as you want, so they may be taking a template that exists and just altering it for you because you don't know how to do it. Really good WordPress people, and there are tons of them out there, can take a base template which has almost no branding and no styling and make it turn into anything you want. And the more customized you get, the higher the price is because generally that person is more talented at doing something like that. And you will still have a little bit of restricted functionality. Instead of something like Wix or Squarespace where they may give you some areas to play around with how content's arranged, with WordPress you'll get some rich text capabilities, but generally what you'll be doing is choosing from page layouts to fill in with content. This is how the WordPress database pulls content into its content on the page. So some of these themes will have predetermined areas for these things to show up. Also a very good option if you want to dip your toe into the world of freelancers and professionals. They do have e-commerce plugins for WordPress. WordPress has plugins for social media outlets, a lot of different things. It's an open source community where people contribute free and paid plugins. It's also a commerce community too. So a lot of times what a web provider will do is get your input on what we talked about earlier, what you want on the site, how you think it needs to address people, and they'll find certain plugins that they can mildly customize to work into your design to achieve those goals. The last option is like something like we do, which is completely customized and proprietary. It's not based off something like WordPress, Joomla, or Drupal. It's built strictly in blank canvas. You give us an idea, we come up with a design, we build it from scratch, we give you a database panel to manage it. There's a lot of benefits to this, and there's some cons to it too. You still get the code-free content management for type and click saving. Fully customized design is a huge pro. Customized functionality and personal support, which you also get when you start working with professionals. The cost goes up yet again. This is sort of a tiered system. You may, instead of just working with one freelancer, you may be working with a team of designers and developers. And because a custom site isn't as open sourced as WordPress, which is a gigantic engine monster where you can expand upon your site in any variety of ways, generally the way we handle it, and some customized people handle it, whether they use PHP, which is what we use, ASP, there's some markdown engines like Jekyll, which is what the White House uses. It has controlled expandability. We're creating page layouts for you, and we're giving you the ability to add pages based on that layout per section. Your About section looks like this, your contact page looks like this, your photo gallery has these options. If you need to add an extra section to your site, you would come back to us and we would make an update to your site. But as far as adding content within the site, you would have full control. So there's like 3 different ways to go about this, and neither of these is wrong, and neither of these is the best. I'd like to say ours is the best, but you could get away with any of them. So if you have a low budget and you want something that looks professional, which is really the end goal, is you want something that looks professional, something like Squarespace would be great. If you've got some money to invest in some design help, you could do something like work with a freelancer or a small web company on a WordPress template design. And if you want to get into something a little bit more advanced and fully customized to you, you could go total custom website. There's not a wrong answer, there's just a lot of different options. Does anyone have any questions on these? Because it's the biggest part of the whole talk. But if I did a good job explaining it, I'll feel free to move on.
Anybody, sometimes if somebody builds, like if you were to build a website for me and you have the control panel, it is easy to press the wrong buttons and screw up the whole site. If you follow me. How difficult is it to repair it if you don't know what you're doing and you're trying to manage, they build the site for you or you build me the site, and then I'm pressing buttons and I screw it up. How is it expensive? Then you have to rebuild it.
You have a different level of involvement depending on which way you go. Sometimes with the WordPress stuff, they give you so many controls that you could inject something into a navigation the wrong way, pull something out of a navigation, choose the wrong template, have things removed. WordPress does a good job, though, of holding revisions and draft histories, which is something that we don't do on the custom side. The custom side, for what we do in particular, and I'm sure some other people do in our industry, is we dial in the field so much, the worst you could do is remove a word and hit save and then lose it, rather than break the site as a structural entity. We like to help people with their content. No one always wants to pay for that, so we like to make it as easy as possible for them to get in there and do it themselves. If anything catastrophe-wise happens, we have server backups on our stuff. We could return something from 2 days ago. Data structurally.
So if we pay 10 or 20,000 for the website, and you screw it up trying to put pictures or things like that, you don't have to pay another 10 or 20,000.
Well, yeah, that's a little extreme. I'm thinking more along the lines of if there was ever an injection attack or something more important than content.
Like a virus.
Yeah, there's ways to go to a backup and implement that and then pick up where you left off. But the one thing that WordPress does that is good is if you make a mistake, sometimes they have drafts. If you have drafts enabled, you can reinstall a draft as the live version, which is also good. Any other questions on the 3 different types of ways to go about your site? Because if you don't have one, you're going to have to pick one. And if you don't understand it, I'm going to be disappointed because I'm trying to make you understand it.
I just have a comment.
Yeah.
I know very little about computers, websites. I have the middle version, the web WordPress.
Mhm.
And I found, I'd gone in there, made a few screw ups and was able to, with the help of someone else, was able to fix it. But I found, like I will put videos in, take them out, articles, things like that, and I found it worked pretty well for me, you know. But-
All of these will give you options to manage stuff yourself, and if you ever really do need help, someone will step in. You can reach out to people to help. Like I said, there's no wrong answer, and the main thing to do is just make sure you pick something where you have some immediate content control yourself, because you don't want to lose contact or have someone think that you're not important enough to change a sentence on your homepage. You should have the ability, if you have been trained properly, to just walk in, bring up the page in your panel, type a few new words, and hit save, and go about your business without having to email anyone, wait for them to do it, or tell them that they didn't do it right and do it again.
Is there anybody that teaches WordPress, or if you wanted to learn WordPress, besides just going on and trying to play with it or calling up a
Mhm.
friend to help you with it, is there any,
There's a group in Buffalo called, they have a WordPress group. They hold, which just started last year, a WordPress camp every fall. The first one was last September. WordPress, some people from WordPress in San Francisco came out to talk at it too. They have 3 different tracks. One's for beginner users, one's for designers, and one's for developers. And what you're referring to would be most definitely the user
either
track.
way.
So you could do a conference style like this, where people tell you about the newest things, how to implement them, how to edit them. You could also reach out to the group to see if there's anyone that holds those more personalized.
It's not something that's formalized, this is just a private group, it's just.
Yeah, well, most groups in the web community are basically mini networking groups that feed off of each other and help people interested in the subject matter. The one good thing about our industry is it's very open source and open knowledge, which is good too, because if someone could step in and pick up where you left off in terms of the project, or let's say they stopped being a provider and they need to refer you to someone that can pick up and carry on with you, that kind of thing.
I did see a WordPress group in Meetup. I'm not sure how often.
That's the one.
Is that the
Yeah,
one? Maybe
it's
once a
run
month
by
or something?
Andy Staple,
Yeah.
and he's a really good guy. He's one of the people that's more of the customized WordPress, like talented guys. Be careful when a larger company says they'll make a WordPress site for you. They'll probably take a template and change the things that you can change yourself and charge you a couple grand for it. Or you could go to someone like him or someone like us and get a little bit more of a customized WordPress theme that actually has some thought and design go into it. But yeah, they're a really good group and they're very knowledgeable too, and they love helping people out.
So can you take a site, like we have a free site on Colorblind, on the DIY, .com, I guess it is. And if you ever wanted to upgrade and get some more customized, could you take that same basic site and move it over to the middle?
Now
the .org?
the Squarespace and Wix stuff, I don't know if you can test this, but what you're doing is you're buying their service and housing your stuff there. So the best you could hope for is that someone could take that design that you looked for and recreate it in one of the other 2 venues. WordPress.com, I believe you can export your data and themes and move them into a custom WordPress theme. Maybe not. We deal mostly in the custom stuff. We only take a few WordPress projects because generally people need enough stuff that we'll just refer them to someone else.
Right.
But what you're talking about between moving from the first one to the second one, definitely not with the monthly paid ones, but because WordPress spans both,
Right.
it's definitely more possible to get data out and put data back in. I guess that's one of the cons I left off on that first list, but it's definitely a good point and something to remember too. But honestly, a good designer would probably look at the site you had and say, this looks nice, but we could go farther with this. And if you're going to make the jump from going from a generic template-based site to any sort of custom design site, you want that designer to pick your brain more than you taking 5 minutes to select something from a screen.
Right.
So what they may do is look at your content structure, maybe carry over a little bit of that, maybe suggest some reorganization, but then base the design off of what you want rather than what was available. But definitely with Squarespace and Wix, you won't be able to move those things off that service. You're basically paying for the license to use their system. So there's no wrong answer here. Just
It's great for you.
yeah. So having moved past the DIY portion, for those of you that are Top Gun fans, find a web wingman. Running out of time. I didn't think I'd run out of time. Good questions. Good conversation. I'll run through this quick. This is basically things to look for if you're going to pay someone money to help you. If you're going to pay someone money to help you, make sure they don't screw you over. That's the blunt way of putting it. They should have knowledge, they should have talent, they should be reliable, and they should have value besides just making you a website. Which is sort of how you should address anything in business. If someone has added value, they're generally probably better to work with. Knowledge, overall experience, which generally people's nephews do not have. Project insight, which means they've done enough projects where maybe someone's been in a situation like you and they can make suggestions on how you should tackle a certain hurdle. Business foresight, meaning I work with a few people in this industry and this industry is going this way. These are things that they're doing, which is a trend type of following. And collaborative trust. If you can't trust that they know what they're doing, then you probably shouldn't be giving them money. Talent, again, nephews don't have portfolios unless they work for a company or a freelancer, in which case they aren't nephews anymore. Portfolios are a good way to find out if someone meets your style, has the quality of work that you want. Don't pigeonhole someone's portfolio into have they done a website that looks just like what I want. Not in terms of design, but in terms of business. Just because someone's done a lawyer website before doesn't mean that they're necessarily better at designing a lawyer website. Design is based off of the conversations you have with someone when you decide to work with them. If someone can make a car, they could make any other car based on the design and the requirements that you ask them to make you. It's knowing how to make the car, which is the important part. What kind of car is a detail you talk about during the project process. So don't pigeonhole someone based on what they've done before in terms of demographic. What you want is you want to identify the quality, you want to identify a style that works with you. And that could be something where you see in a manufacturing website that may not apply to your industry, but you like the way that it looked. And you like, these guys do things that I like. You want to be able to appreciate what someone does for you rather than kind of choose based on some rudimentary stat that you think is relevant. I don't say that to put any of you down if you think that. So relating to the style is what I was getting at there, and current trends. Someone can have a lot of good websites, but if they don't match what's coming out now, that means they've stuck themselves in a plateau where they've stopped learning new things and just try and make money. You want someone that has advanced and keeps up with everything. I'm in an industry where we have to have research and development on a daily basis. And if you don't think that potential customers and website visitors will recognize that, then you're naive. And that goes back to looking at your competitors' websites. You may be able to identify that their websites are bad because you see they don't match other websites in the industry that are of like the corporate nature or higher ups. So that's why trends are important. Reliability is simply for your peace of mind. If someone's established, they're probably not going anywhere. If they're available, that means they're going to help you if you email or call them. It may not always be immediate, but it will likely be within a day, and it will be personal communication. History of success is good. Neil talked about this with his value propositions in his last talk. I'm talking about that because I watched it. If you have a history of success and you've done things that have been successful for people, then that will most ultimately work out the same way for you if you provide the right information and participate in the process the same way. And testimonials is basically just another bullet point based on success. Now, there's a lot of web professionals. If you can cover those first three, you're probably going to be pretty good. If you want to take it a step further, a lot of us creative types do graphic design, which means logos, marketing materials, business cards, things that go to print, things that get your name out besides the website. We talked about getting people to your site through other venues. Well, promotional materials are a good way to do that. And if those people designed your site, they probably know the style that you need those in. And it's nice to have things matched. Marketing, you could go anywhere with that. Some people offer that, some don't. And what we were getting at before with optimization and copywriting, if you have a site and it doesn't have good information or hit on certain keywords within the content, not just stuffed on the page, you won't have any visibility on search engines. I'm kind of going fast because we're running out of time. I'm sorry. Responsive web design. Who's heard of responsive web design? Okay. I put this little bumblebee transformer up here to try and make the point. How many of you view websites on your phone? How many of you view websites on your tablet? How many of you don't like zooming in on websites? Okay, so what responsive web design is, and I got this little screen cap of a site we did. It takes the same website, it does not build for websites. It uses code to morph that site like a transformer. Bumblebee's my favorite, that's why I put them there. And on different desktops, it optimizes the space used. When it gets the tablet, it rearranges items. It may possibly drop some items. It may possibly move some things in. The biggest thing you'll probably notice is navigation gets hidden with a button for the menu, so it saves screen space. And same with the phone. And what you're doing is you're taking a site that's vertically scrollable on a desktop and making sure that it's vertically scrollable on a phone, but you brought the content up so that you don't have to zoom in on it and you can see it with the naked eye.
Do any of the DIY or DIY?
Squarespace is really good at that. That's why I recommend it. Wix, not so much.
WordPress?
And WordPress has a lot of responsive templates too. So if you get into that. The great thing about Squarespace though is that it will help you not mess up your website. So that's why I push that one to DIY people a lot. So I got some little stats up here, but I kind of demonstrated this with you guys raising your hands. 30% of web traffic is actually on phone. 36% of e-commerce now is actually going through phone, which is a new and rising percentage. So basically, all that means is that if you're going to sell things on your site, if you make it responsive, it will make the browsing experience better. Instead of zooming in on all the little squares of the products, you can scroll through them and click in. Generally, the carts get rearranged a little bit to make the mobile experience through the cart different. You are having the same site. This bullet point is in reference to mobile sites versus responsive sites. When you build a responsive site, it's the same website displaying different ways with the same code. We work a little style magic in the background. If you get a mobile site, that's a completely different site, and you may have experienced something where you're on like m.website.com. That's a completely different URL than your other website. I've gotten this through WGR has a mobile website, and sometimes their staff will post a blog and they'll tweet out the mobile website because they were on their phone. And if you're on a desktop and you click that link, it takes you to the mobile site. It's a skinny little thing on the screen. What this does is it allows the same URL to get hit in search engines. It allows you to share the same URL, and no matter what they open it up on, it's optimized for their viewing pleasure. And that's the point of responsive design. If someone's not providing you responsive design, do not work with them. That means they don't care. That also means that they don't feel like learning new stuff.
Does it cost more?
No, it shouldn't. Anyone that's good at this has rolled this into their general practice. So what I mean by if they're not doing it, if they're quoting you, then it should be included. It's something that's become standard in the industry, and that means if they haven't caught up to it, then they're sort of just pumping out projects to stay afloat. And it's nice, sort of like what I was talking about with trends on the Wingman slide a couple ago. It's nice to see someone keeping up with what's going on, because if your interests aren't being met in terms of where the industry is, then they aren't providing you a valuable service. They're just sort of handing you something that's somewhat useful. When there was this gray area where this just started happening and so people were transitioning, they were charging extra for it, but since then it's become much more rolled in to the project workflow through different technologies and things that we use to make it quicker.
Question, don't
Yeah.
you think that that's becoming more and more of a standard, that websites should be written and responsive from the ground?
Oh, it's definitely a standard.
Yeah, because I don't like the whole mobile thing. It's ridiculous. If I'm on one site, I shouldn't have to go to another.
And in
Which is
some cases, they're
technically
managing
what's
different content on both too.
Exactly.
Does responsive mean you don't have to buy a separate web app, or?
You really don't. You
Right,
just
well, it
look-
depends. Apps is a whole nother thing. If you're just trying to serve information from a website, you would never really need an app, but some people use apps as a way to get around this. Apps are more for actual client engagement. They're better off
For
for
the phone,
service
if I want
providers.
to take my website and put it on the phone,
Because technically.
It's all one thing. It's like
you
this
coded
transformer.
One
Yep.
time, and you
so
told
then
them.
that website doesn't need to be a you don't need
Right.
to hire to have a second one.
No.
Bumblebee in human or alien format is the same as Bumblebee in car format. He just looks different. He's got all the same
Okay.
root parts.
So basically, when the designer writes it, they should be writing it in responsive from line one of the
Mhm.
code is really what it is.
Let me speed through some of these ones because we're definitely running out of time. When you get to having a site, whether it's through DIY or custom, make sure you take care of your content. If you aren't taking care of your content, if you aren't updating it, search engines will realize that you're being stale. And just like you with your friends, you don't like your friends being stale. You like hearing news stories, not the same one over and over again. There's 3 things to consider. Balance your text and images. No one wants to read Lord of the Rings, but no one wants to read Clifford the Big Red Dog. Just find a nice space in between. Page organization is something you should talk about with your web professional. They will help you identify which sections to put your content, how to make it more compacted, like an encyclopedia, rather than just like a binder full of papers. Within your sections, this is something that feeds very well into WordPress and custom sites, and probably even DIY sites. Try and make design consistent inside of your sections. If someone's in the product section, every time they go to a product page, it should look similar so they know where things are. Visitor familiarity breeds like confidence in what they're viewing. Image sizing and formatting. When you do the DIY stuff, this can become kind of a problem. They'll give you the ability to upload a photo and size it, but they may not take a new sample of that image. So you may show an image this big on your screen and it may be a file this big. If you have too many of those on your page and you try and have a 6 megabyte file come up as an image because you uploaded a raw or like a high version JPEG, the search engines will dock you very hard for that. We had a client that was doing that, and we helped them format some of their images, re-upload them to page weight. That's called page weight, sort of like human weight. As soon as the page weight went down, their results went up. It's something as simple as that could affect you. So don't be scared if you're working with a designer. This isn't just to like feed into my industry, but sometimes they can help you do more than you think you already have the ability to do. That doesn't mean you have to do it. It just may be an added benefit to taking advantage of someone's talents. I know you're probably gonna have 50 questions about this, but I'm gonna try and do it really quick so we can get through the last couple slides. Like I said, in baby steps, you may not get to this until the very end. Just so you guys know, e-commerce works with 3 parts. You have to have your website, you have to have the processor, which transfers the data between the website and your merchant account, and you have to have the merchant account or your money can't go anywhere. Some examples of these are for the processors, PayPal, PayPal Pro, and Authorize.net. What these are sort of wormholes that data goes through. And your merchant account can be through any bank. Ours is through our bank for our company. Be careful of third-party people. Sometimes they have a lot of cancellation fees and it's hard to get out of those contracts. For small businesses, I always say go PayPal Pro because they give developers access to integrate everything customizably. And there's also a way to use PayPal where you send people off-site, which is very inexpensive to implement into a website. So if you're going on a shoestring budget, you can still work in baby steps there too. What you'll probably see, what you will see is when you have a website, you need to secure it. This is what we were talking about earlier. You have to encrypt the data that people are putting in. And even as we've seen with things like Target and everything, it's not always foolproof, but these people have insurance. I don't say that to scare anyone, it rarely ever happens, but that's called an SSL certificate. That's the little lock that shows up in the URL bar when you're in a shopping cart. Sometimes the bar turns a different color, like blue or green. Dedicated IP is just something that works with it, and your merchant provider will probably require you to have a terms of service, refund policy, privacy policy, and shipping policy if you ship on your site. These are client confidence things that they want to see before they approve your account. I'm sorry that that slide is so quick. Anyone that helps you with a website with e-commerce should run through all of this with you. So this is just the gist of the conversation. When you get to the point where you're working with someone for that, ask all of the questions. They will have answers for you. This I'm going to go through quick. This is a little tips and tricks thing. We talked about SEO. You don't have to hire someone for SEO if you know a couple of good things. And I also want you to be prepared to not fall for any dirty tricks. So real quickly, and you guys can see the slides after this, identify keywords, work them into your content. Don't just slap them on the page. We're a Buffalo, New York web design company, so one of our lines on our homepage is Luminous Media is a Buffalo, New York web design company. There, I just did. Synergy with page content. Your page title, bolded words in your content. These engines might give you options for heading 1, heading 2, heading 3. They're all very important. Try and work the same words into each one. Think of it as like, they say if you do something a certain amount of times, you'll learn it. That's what search engines are looking for too throughout the different items of the page. Optimize for the visitor, don't optimize for the search engine. And don't fall for people telling you they can guarantee you number 1. That's not how search engines work. What they should guarantee you is that they will optimize for what you want, give you reports on how it's working. They will get you as high as they can, and if it's not high enough, they will address maybe a different way of getting to viewers. But if it's not through that specific keyword string, maybe a different one that can better perform. Don't expect to be number 1 for golf, but maybe a boutique golf shop in Western New York, boutique location-based SEO is very successful, especially for small businesses. A site doesn't have to be on 100 search engines. Yahoo, Bing, Google, there's a couple other ones. Those are your most important ones. Yahoo and Bing work off the same engine. No one of those platforms that I gave you is best for SEO. Like I told you at the top, SEO is based heavily on content and a proper site build. Link backs are not always good for you. If they link back from a bad website, it will hurt you. Think of like viruses in human world. If you touch someone with a flu, that's not good. Bad websites are people that have flus. And some SEO companies will slap your link on 2,000 websites, and half of those will be docked by search engines as being poor websites, which will affect your score. SEO is simply set it and forget it. Like I said, a good company, while they may not be changing your campaign, will be reporting on your campaign and updating you on its performance. You're not paying them for the ranking, you're paying them to keep an eye out on everything that you're doing. If you are optimizing for a certain string of words, they'll tell you if it went down, if it went up, why it went down, why it went up, if there's a way to improve upon it. You're paying for their time and labor more than you're paying for a result. So keep that in mind. If something isn't getting you a result, then they should be working on a different way of getting you a result. Maybe the original idea wasn't right. So I know this is quick. This is just sort of the quick little process. Research, keyword identification, actually implementing these things on the site, working them into your copy, because that's really where optimization comes from. Your speed and site performance, that's what I was talking about with image sizes. Marketing and link building, if done correctly, is very effective. I call it the popular by association rule. Rankings and report and tracking, that's the most important ones are the coding, copywriting, and ranking and reporting. If you don't see them doing stuff and they aren't telling you how it's working, then they're not doing their job. And then what you were getting to earlier also, this is the last, if not the second to last slide. The other way to get it is to buy it. So you've all done searches where the paid ads come up on the side. That's called pay-per-click, PPC. Google, Yahoo, social media has them. Facebook, you see them all the time. This works the same kind of way. They'll talk with what your goals are. They'll identify keywords because it's all keyword based. They'll write you the copy for the ads, which are based off of trying to draw people's attention. They'll make pages to draw these people to so they can track it, and they'll report on it. And you're doing the same kind of thing as SEO. You're paying them to get things set up for you and then report back and tell you how everything's working. And then this last page is just a summary of everything we talked about. This is your step. Buy the domain, choose what type of site you want, find a reliable person to work with if that's the route you're going for. You could also apply that to find a reliable engine to build your site on. Develop rich content and images so that your content speaks for the services and keywords you're trying to hit. Implement e-commerce if that's the way you go. Optimize your content, and then find potential business if you want to take your website a step further. And that's my last slide.
I just want to say, the speakers today, I mean, if you've noticed, are really incredible, Fred and Neil. And one of the things Tim did was getting someone like Tim to actually build our website for this event, and he has given incredibly a lot. He doesn't have to sell just his presentation.
I sell helping people, so that's why I was trying to make this not a sales pitch.
So anyways, just thank you
That was
for
useful.
everything you've given to us today. Thank you.
No problem. If you have questions later, I plan on hanging around for the little networking stuff at the end. I know we sped through the last 5 things, so hopefully it was educational, and please go look at the slides again if you missed something and I went too fast.